Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar, A Banking Guide for Veterans. My name is Kelly Blount, and I'm the Program Marketing Specialist here at General Electric Credit Union. We're excited to partner with Wounded Warrior Project and Trinity Debt Management to provide informational content to help you along your journey. Thanks to technology, we're excited to be able to connect with you from a distance and wanted to thank you all for tuning in from the comfort of your home, work, or wherever you may be today. And with that, I'm excited to turn this over to Deborah Olvera to introduce herself and take us through the first part of our presentation.
Thank you, Kelly. Hello, everyone. And first and foremost, thank you for your service. My name is Deborah Olvera. I am the Financial Education Manager for the Financial Education Program at Wounded Warrior Project. Wounded Warrior Project is a nonprofit organization serving veterans and service members who have incurred a physical or mental injury, illness, or wound while serving in the military on or after September 11th, 2001. And today we're here to talk to you a little bit about financial challenges that are faced by veterans. So here are some things to consider before transitioning from the military. Cost of living for your new permanent residence. Planning for transition should happen no less than a year before your transition is expected to occur if possible. Now, we know that that is not always possible, so you start as soon as you can. You definitely want to research the city and the state that you are planning to exit to. So wherever you decide you're looking to move to, you want to research that city and state for several things. You want to know what the rents and mortgages are like, what the housing market is like, what is the cost for food, for utilities, and does that state charge state income tax? Not every state does. You may be living in a state that doesn't currently have a state income tax, so that could be an additional cost. Now, once you've selected where you're choosing to live, and if that place is other than the city of the duty station that you're from which you're exiting, make sure that you also research the cost of what it's going to take to move you from that place to your new location. Moves can be very costly and they require, an immense amount of planning, or at least a good deal of planning. And there's always things that can go wrong. So, make sure you look into those costs. Another thing to consider is increased expenses due to loss of military benefits, things such as medical insurance and life insurance. In the civilian world, medical insurance and life insurance, comes at a cost. When you're in the military, some of those costs are not, transferable to you. But even if you have secured employment that does offer medical benefits for you and your family, there is a cost to the premiums and the co-pays. And depending on the plan, those costs can be, pretty significant. And then as far as the life insurance is concerned, some of you may participate or sign up for the VGLI, but as time goes by, the cost of the VGLI does increase. So you need to be aware of that and find out what those increases look like. Another thing to consider is differences in civilian pay versus military pay. So of course you have your BAH and your BAS whenever you are, in service. These allowances end once you leave the military. And these allowances don't generally exist in the civilian world or when you're under civilian employment. Although you can find a job that does have maybe some fringe benefits, those aren't very common and they are hard to come by. So it's very important to research as I mentioned before, what those rents, what the cost of living is going to be like in that area that you're moving into. Another thing to consider is that civilian salary to base pay, or versus your base pay. That base pay may be a lot less than what you are currently seeing, in your current pay structure, because you don't have the BAH, you don't have the BAS, you're definitely going to be bringing in more in many cases than once you transition out and you're now working, as a veteran in a job in the job market. So that pay can be much lower than what you're accustomed to. So compare this with your current standard of living to determine where you may need to cut back and determine whether or not you can sustain yourself based off of what the average median income would be in that area. So here are some challenges that you may face after transition. And this could be some of you right now. Some of you may be going through these challenges already. And one of them could be, then this is directly right after transition. There could be a delay in receiving the last paycheck from the military. For whatever reason, whether it's just a processing error or the documentation didn't get submitted properly, you may have a delay in receiving that last paycheck, which could put a strain on you financially. Another is delay in receiving VA disability and retirement payments. The process for receiving your VA disability or a retirement payment is slow, and it does take time. It could be months before you can see your first payment or before that first payment gets to you. So you really want to be prepared for that, even if you only have, 3 months or 6 months worth of savings to last you. That's 3 or 6 months worth that you do not have to be worried about in case you have not yet received those payments. And then it's the job search process. So this particular process can also take some time. Even if you're somebody who thinks that you already or you've been told you have a job that's secured, it's not secured until you start, right? So anything can go wrong. So always have a plan B if you can. Make sure that if you don't have a job lined up, that you research the job market in your area to include the industry that you're wanting to work in. The recruiting process can also take some time, and each company and organization has their own process, and that can be a lot longer than what you were anticipating. Remember, for many of you, it has been some time since you've been in the job market, and it may have changed significantly. Those processes may have changed. And then as far as the securing employment is concerned, just be prepared that you may need to apply to several positions before you actually secure an interview. So if you haven't started applying for a job until after you've transitioned, then no, it's going to take some time from the time that you actually find a job that you want to apply for, put in that application, and then that they start the screening process and move you through the recruitment process. And that's especially true if you are entering into a career field that is very competitive. So it could be several months before you actually find employment and then begin to receive that income stream. And that's where the incurring debt comes into play. If you are not prepared for the lag in receiving your income, you may end up incurring debt, in order to make ends meet. And that can also put a great financial strain as well and stress. And then maintain your life and health insurance. It may not seem like a really big deal for some of you. You think, okay, life and health insurance, I'll deal with that after I've transitioned out. But this form of asset protection can mitigate a severe financial crisis. It's not only for you, the veteran, but also for your family as well. A large medical expense can be a significant financial drain on your household. Losing a loved one, especially if the household is dependent on that loved one's income, it can completely break down your finances and cause some, tremendous personal financial, issues and situations. So how do you prepare for transition? First and foremost, you want to create a budget, and you're probably going to hear this often throughout this entire presentation. The budget is a foundation that your financial preparedness is built on. So you want to have that budget just so that you are just keeping track of what's coming in and what's going out. If you currently already have a budget, make sure to have it reviewed to make sure that you're not missing something or that there needs to be some adjustments made to it so that you're prepared. Also, start saving now. Even if you're already in the middle of your transition and you're halfway there or you're out of your transition, if you have the ability to save some money, even if it's a small amount, start putting some money aside. Determine how much you have to work with, after you've created that budget and you know what your expenses are, and then begin to contribute to your emergency savings based off of that amount. Now, for those of you who are still active duty, utilize the financial counseling resources that you currently have that are available to you by the military. Most TAP programs offer financial counseling, and in some cases up to 6 months after transition. Um, those professionals are licensed and certified counselors in those particular programs. So see what's being offered by the military and utilize them. They're free to you. They're just extra resources to help you get prepared. They can also help you make a plan. So, try to talk to them about it, see if they can work with you to create a plan. Even, a basic plan is better than no plan at all. And for those of you who have already transitioned out and you want to have your budget reviewed, you can reach out to some of, your local banks such as GECU, your credit union. You can also reach out to other organizations such as ours to get additional resources that might be able to provide that education for you and that assistance. And then once you have gathered all that information from your research on cost of living, job market, revise your budget to include that new information. This should give you a baseline of how much you will need to maintain your lifestyle or to be able to sustain and just kind of reduce that level of financial stress. So what can you do if you're currently facing some of these challenges? Again, budget, and that's always number one, is the top on the billet right there. A budget will help you understand what you are working with. Even if you think that you're not making sufficient income, a budget will put things into perspective, and it's going to help you prioritize your expenses as well. Utilize your emergency savings before incurring the debt. Now that you have, that you can create a plan and you're able to figure out how you can utilize what you have in your emergency fund before you start dipping into, maybe having to take out loans or credit cards, which if you can avoid at all costs, would be the best situation, although sometimes it cannot be helped. And then evaluate where you can cut back. After you have made the list of priorities of what needs to be paid, right off the bat, you have to pay them, must pay them. Then from there, you can determine what you can cut back on or what you can do without for the time being. Always ask yourself, is this something that I absolutely need right now? Can I put it on hold for a little while? Can I come back to it? Is it going to make that much of a difference in my life? And then if you do have other people living in your home, so have a conversation with your family. Let them know, look, for a little while, we may have to do away with, the Disney Channel or, whatever streaming services that you have or whatever it is that everybody's enjoying and getting use out of. And there are many national resources that you can also reach out to, national veterans resources and local resources too. You definitely can look into, the city local resources, but you can reach out to veterans organizations such as Wounded Warrior Project, even if you are not an enrolled alumni with Wounded Warrior Project, or maybe you don't meet the criteria. We still have a database where we can provide you with, a list of resources if there are some in your area that might be able to provide that assistance. And then this is the one that most people tend to shy away from, which is reaching out to your creditors. It can be very daunting to think that you have to contact your creditor and tell them, look, I can't make a payment right now. But what I can tell you is that, creditors want to work with you. For the most part, they don't want your car back. They don't want the house back. They want to help you so that way you can get back to making the payments as agreed, and they don't have to go through the process of, trying to repossess a car or foreclose on a mortgage. If you don't reach out to them and you avoid them, it's going to seem like you're just trying to get out of not paying, as opposed to really explaining to them what's going on in your world. And for the most part, anybody that you get on the other line is going to be understanding. So that concludes the first portion of my presentation. Kelly?
Yes, thank you so much, Deborah. At this time, we're going to switch gears and show you just how you can start thinking about your own budget. And then we will hear from Deborah again for more on the Wounded Warrior Project. So at this time, I'd like to turn things over to Todd Moore with Trinity Debt Management.
Thank you so much, Kelly, and thank you, Deborah. Enjoyed hearing this first part of the presentation. Let me first say that it's an honor to work with the Wounded Warriors Project. Here at Trinity Debt Management, we are very supportive of our military families, and we look forward to working long-term with the Wounded Warrior Project. And for those that are on the call, certainly many of the services that we provide, and we do have experience working with our veterans in a whole range of services, everything from budgeting and credit counseling, student loans, credit, and a whole range of other topics unique to veterans. So just wanted to say on behalf of Trinity that we certainly look forward to serving you. But for today's presentation, just listening to those first few slides, we've heard numerous times the importance of budgeting. And that certainly is the attitude that we have here at Trinity Debt Management. We understand how important it is to long-term planning and how important budgeting is to meeting both those immediate needs and longer-term needs. It sounds, as I learn more about the Wounded Warrior Project and maybe some of those on the call today, transitioning back into civilian life, I mean, this is a major transition. So having folks that are able to help you, certainly Trinity Debt Management and the credit union as well, but looking at this narrow question of just how to set up a budget, I thought we would spend our time together, just kind of focus on some good tips, some practical ways to get this part of this transition started for you, focusing on budgeting and helping you set some clear priorities. Now, traditionally, I'd always start out by saying, when we think about budgeting, just beyond the numbers, that we think about, why are we doing this in the first place? We find our why. What is that? We write that down. For those on the call, we certainly know in the broadest terms, we're moving back into civilian life, and this is a big change. So having a budget in this process is very important. Throughout this call, I've heard, life insurance, meeting your credit obligations, or just rebuilding savings, all those sorts of things. Having a budget is going to help you meet all of those obligations. And that's really, I'll offer a couple different budgets that I think will be very practical and useful for you. But certainly in this case, just as you make this transition, having a budget will put those things into action for you. We'll show you those in the next few slides. Next slide, please. So let's get into some of the nuts and bolts of budgeting, just kind of break it down. I always like to look beyond those numbers and just really think about all budgets are about setting priorities. So we know from this first bullet point here, just income and expenses, you looking at the dollars that you have and the expenses that you will be incurring. It's very important. If you look down, I'm going to present this afternoon what we call the 50-30-20 budget and the money flow budget. But all budgets really are about setting clear priorities. And using some of these guidelines I'll lay out today, if it is the question of whether we maintain our, maintain life insurance of some sort or health insurance, rebuilding our savings, whether it's meeting some type of credit obligation, these two budgets that I present today will help you do all of those things, in addition to the whatever services that I can provide to you to help you through that transition. But when we start to think about just budgeting generally, income and expenses, finding a tool that you can be committed to, whether it's this 50-30-20 or the money flow budget. But the idea is always to set clear priorities. We've laid out some of those priorities. Deborah laid out some of those priorities in the first part of the presentation. But just thinking about longer term, we've heard this notion of overspending and reducing expenses. Certainly, as you make that transition, trying to have a budget that's lean and mean, and that you can cut all expenses to meet those larger priorities, particularly when it comes to, whether it's healthcare or insurance, as you find employment, that would be, those expenses be covered through a group plan of some sort. But in that short term, that should be one of the highest priorities for you. And in order to meet that obligation, you will certainly have to reduce, any outstanding expenses, or just reduce expenses to help you meet those larger obligations. So in addition to the budget that I'll show you, I'm going to ask you to get into the habit of tracking expenses, and we'll walk into that here in a few minutes. But this tracking exercise is very important, because as you do this over a longer period of time, it's really about changing how you it's really about changing your behavior, identifying things that maybe you're overspending on, setting better priorities with cash expenses, those sorts of things. And really, it's going to take a few months of really tracking expenses to get into the habit of doing it. But the idea is that in addition to your budget, where you have income and expenses set, that you're also tracking those cash expenses that are not necessarily captured in your overall budget, so that things are in alignment at that point. You know what you're spending, outside those dollars that you have budgeted, and you're also, taking a second look at your cash expenses, trying to align those dollars in a better way. So as we go forward, again, our focus will be looking at a couple different budgets today to help you get started. Next slide, please. And you can go ahead, Kelly, one more slide. When we think about priorities and setting priorities, wanted to give you a couple things here, just longer term to think about. Certainly, thinking about this notion of savings or rebuilding emergency savings funds. Now, on the General Electric Credit Union website, we've done quite a lot of work with in-depth budgeting, so you can go back in addition to this presentation and look at some of those things that we've presented before. And there's also things there about investments. But part of prioritizing savings, you might be in the stage where you're trying to rebuild an emergency savings fund. Certainly COVID-19 and the impact, we've talked about that at the credit union before. But just thinking about rebuilding savings in some sort, having a consistent budget that you're working through is going to be the tool that you will use, in addition to some type of credit union account that you can utilize. That's the tools that you're going to use to rebuild over time your emergency savings, or rebuild some type of savings for yourself. Also, just putting some money into some type of longer term retirement plan, in addition to the military benefits that you have. As you think longer term, whether it's employer-based 401k, or you're looking at some other type of approach to save for retirement, these things can all be structured into your budget, so that as you're meeting your overall obligations, your overall monthly expenses, you're also setting aside a little money each week through paychecks that are putting aside money for either retirement or for longer term savings. We're always going to aim at trying to make this as simple as possible. We always talk about automatic deductions. I'll show you that in one of the budgets here in a few moments, but just anything that we can do to automate this process to make it easier for you, the better. And one of the budgets I'll show you here in a few minutes, basically we can set things up in a way that you'll automatically have money deducted from your save, automatically have money from your check that's put into a savings. So as we'll say in the future budget, set it and forget it. So some of those dollars will be coming out of your account, putting into this account for long-term savings. That'll build that fund longer term for you. And it's all automatically done. The easier, the better, and the more savings you'll have at the end of the year. So next slide, please. So a couple things to focus on here. If as you transition out, just again, setting up some type of emergency account, savings account. As you work with the credit union, we can, in addition to your basic checking account or savings account, you can set up something that's unique to this particular account, a longer term savings account where we can set it up that it's automatically deducted, and you build that over a longer term. That will be that emergency savings fund that you will build. Setting, the credit union can also work with you to specify certain purchases that you may make you could decline those purchases. It's another way to kind of build in some savings for yourself. If there's routine items or things that maybe you're overspending on, there's ways to decline those purchases where you can specify, certain amounts or decline certain purchases. That's a wonderful tool that the credit union is able to help with, again, to help you stay on track and keep you within your budget. We'll talk a little bit about monitoring your spending and tracking your expenses through your transaction history. So this is directly from your bank account itself. When we're thinking about really, changing behavior or looking at ways that we can stay within our budget or use just basic tracking methods to make certain that we're aligning our expenses in a way that's arriving at outcomes, whatever those may be, health insurance, etc. That this tracking exercise is very important in doing that because it limits those cash expenses out of pocket and keeps you within your budget. And again, as we move through the next few slides, we'll talk about ways just to automate this process so that once all of this work is done, you identify your income and expenses, reoccurring expenses, then we can have money going into an account and automatically deducted towards other priorities that you have built into your budget. Next slide, please. So now we're going to transition, just walking you through a little bit about tracking your expenses. Okay, I've talked broadly about changing behavior. So what does that exactly mean? In many cases, what we're looking at, you go in, you look at your transaction history through your bank account, you notice that you're overspending on just overspending on any number of different items. This could be food related, entertainment, whole range of things. The idea is that you identify what that is. So, I fall into the most classic example probably of coffee and those sorts of things. Whether it's Starbucks, whether it's just things for the kids, all of those things at the end of the month actually, distract from my larger budget and my priorities. So this applies to you as well. So the idea is that you go in, you look at your transaction history, you look for those reoccurring expenses, things that you find over and over again. That's a red flag. That's telling you, in other words, that you're overspending in those certain items. And those are dollars that you could be using to pay down credit cards or create more, savings for yourself long term, start an IRA, whatever that financial goal may be. But the idea is that you actually start to track your expenses. And you can do this, they always say, you do this for about, 30 days, do it for a month. I would say do it a little longer. You want that habit to develop. You want to get to the point where, you start to question yourself when you start to overspend on certain items. Sometimes 30 days is not quite enough. But the idea is that you continue to track those expenses, shift those behaviors, whatever it may be, so that the dollars that you have are always aligned to your larger financial goals. And it can be a wonderful exercise and a challenging exercise at times, but the outcomes are always strong if you stay committed to doing the work. So there's also a way that can help you through the credit union to do this, which is the money management tool. And Kelly and others at the credit union can help you set that up, or even show you some additional ways that you can utilize that tool. I always plug this in presentations, trying to get more folks to use it, but it is a very great tool a very important tool to use as you're tracking expenses and just trying to improve your overall money management habits. So encourage you to track your expenses, those things that are outside your budget that you haven't, these are cash expenses that are not documented well within your budget. And then you're identifying some of those overspending items, and you shift those habits and behaviors, try to align that to your larger financial goals, whatever they may be. Next slide. All right, so having laid out some of that groundwork and trying to work through this process of just trying to figure out what our objectives are going to be as we transition back into civilian life, this is where we can really make things very practical. So I'm going to show you a couple budgeting methods in addition to just tracking your expenses. But these are these budgeting methods that I hope that you will apply, and that I can certainly help set up for you and give you any kind of guidance that you need as you work through this process. All you'd have to do is just reach out to me here at Trinity, and I will help you set up the budget or review a budget that you may have, and those services are free, and I truly mean free. Next slide. So this is the 50-30-20 budget. Not certain if you've seen this approach or maybe you've heard about it. But this is what we call the loose big picture or no fine details. I mean, basically what we're looking at, if you look at the graphic here, 50-30-20, each of these categories, one of the nice things about this is you look at your overall income, and you would expect this to break down to where you'd say at least 50% of my income has to go to meeting my required expenses. So this is going to be many of those things that Deborah talked about earlier, and some of the things that we mentioned earlier in the presentation about just what those priorities may look like. So, insurance is listed here, any type of debts that you have, your housing needs, utilities, groceries, those were all things that Deborah talked about in the first part of the presentation. So this is a great way to structure, taking that in the abstract and finding a concrete way to actually structure your budget so you meet those obligations. So as you get your income, you always make certain to meet those required expenses first. That's the highest priority. So those things are built automatically into your budget. So we would expect out of that overall income, about half of it goes to meeting those expenses or those obligations. And then it also structures 20% there for some type of savings. So in this case, we've talked about an emergency fund or planning for retirement, whatever that may be. In the short term, it might just be building some type of emergency fund, having some type of fund there for a future hardship, which is certain to come. So we would just, set the budget up so that at least we have money coming out of our paycheck, or that's automatically deducted around that 20%. We've got 20% of our funds going into some type of emergency fund, so it's automatically structured, and then it leaves some discretionary spending there. Basically, this is money that you can do anything you want with. So this is a great budget for those who are really just trying to structure a budget. They don't want to be overly detailed in the budget. They want to have some money in there, some money left to do a few things with, but they also want to make certain that they meet their priorities. So that's why we say it's a looser budget or a big picture budget, but there's not clear details. I mean, this budget leaves 30% for discretionary spending. So you have some funds to play with. You have some additional funds to use however you want. But it does make certain that you create a percentage for your savings, and you meet your larger obligations up front before you do anything else. So maybe think about these percentages as a rule of thumb and setting up your budget, taking those ideas that we talked about up front in the abstract and really applying them in a way that structures your money around these percentages. Again, the goal is to make certain that you stay within budget and that whatever obligations that you have defined are met. This is a great way to do it. Next slide, please. The next approach here is what we call the money flow budget. So basically what we do here is, this is the budget that we always refer to as set it and forget it. So I talked earlier, just about ways to use different accounts and transferring money and all those sorts of things. Well, we have to take that in the abstract again and kind of put it into practice. So a money flow budget is a great way to do this. So it requires some upfront work. That is, you have to identify, go into your transaction history, or just sit down and take the time to really identify up front, reoccurring expenses. So many of those are going to be things that have to do with what we've seen in that 50% category in the previous slide. That's going to be housing, insurance, things like that. Those are those obligations that have to be met up front. Well, we do those sorts of things, but we do it in a way where we identify the cost and the due dates, those sorts of things. We basically get all that together first. As our money comes into our bank account, we can then align our budget and our goals in a way that we can automatically have those expenses directly pulled from our checking account so that it basically just pays out through time. So it's automatically deducted. You add in this category as well, things like your savings. That automatically goes into a separate account. So you'll have your checking account. You may have two savings accounts. You may have an account that you're putting money away for a short term. You may have something you're just putting a little money into for a long-term savings. So you can do this in various ways. But the idea is that the money flow budget is set up in a way that it's automated. So as opposed to you going in and writing checks or paying out online and doing those sorts of things, this is automatically set up so it's automatic bill pay. And that's that. I've listed several of these reoccurring expenses, whether it's rent, utilities, cell phone, whatever it may be. This is a great way to set that up so that it's automatically withdrawn from that account, automatically paid, so you're on time, and you always keep a rolling tally of what those expenses look like. So it's at the end of the month what you're working with. Now, what this does is it's basically going to automatically set up all those reoccurring expenses and meet your savings priority. And then the burden's on you to figure out how you want to do some of your other cash expenses or variable expenses. That's one of the reasons why I talked about, tracking outside your budget, tracking your expenses outside your budget so that you know how much cash you're spending in addition to what you've already spent through the numbers you've put through your overall budget. So the two budgets, basically what we have is two various methods, and you have to find one that works best for you. So I want to encourage you to kind of think about that, figure out which one of these approaches you think would best suit your needs, because in personal finance, it has to be unique to you. It's the only way to really make this work realistic. Find something that works best for you. Next slide, please. So basically, now that you've got these couple budgets, we've given you some tips on how to track your expenses. Now you have to make some decisions, determine how this is going to work for you, basically longer term. Next slide, please. So, with the credit union, one of the great tools there is, again, I'm not sure if it's listed, the money management tool. Yes, the first one that's listed here. Just making certain that, contact the credit union so that if you are interested in setting up something through the money flow budget, there's ways to, work with the credit union to do that. Setting up a separate savings account, making sure that account is structured so bills are automatically withdrawn. That's really what I wanted to make certain that you're aware of in this particular slide, is just reaching out to the credit union to let them know your needs and using the services that they have to kind of align your finances and align your financial goals.
Thank you, Todd.
Okay.
So I'm going to turn it back over to Deborah to close out with some slides on the Wounded Warrior Project.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Todd, that was a fantastic presentation. I am going to pick on something that you just said and not really pick on it, but I'm going to, I guess, emphasize it. You said find something that works for you. So that is a really good segue into what my next presentation, and that would be talking a little bit about the financial education program with Wounded Warrior Project. Okay, so our Our mission here is to empower warriors to build a strong foundation and reach their financial goals. So what does that really mean? Going back to the finding something that works for you. This program was developed with the idea that there is no one size fits all, program or plan when we're talking about finances. Everybody's different. Everybody's struggles are different. Your households are different. Where you live is different. So not every single piece of education will necessarily apply to you in your situation. So our program offers a variety of opportunities, educational opportunities, and they're listed here. We offer we have a seminar curriculum, we have one-on-one counseling, we do have some online resources, and we also have some supportive services. So this just kind of gives you a little idea of what the definitions of all of these are. So we do have a curriculum. Right now, we have several courses. We have about 6 courses that we offer. It is a series of seminars that are offered to our warriors and family support members who reside in certain service eligibility states or areas. Now we are currently working on opening up those areas and offering to more places. We also offer those one-on-ones with a financial expert. These are one-on-ones that are provided, and they're complimentary one-on-ones that are provided with our seminar facilitators. They usually last between 20 to 30 minutes, and you can basically talk to them about specific things that you're wanting more guidance on. And one key piece of our program is support from one of our WWP financial education specialists. It is a financial education teammate that will provide support for our warriors and family support members to help them kind of stay on a financial wellness plan, to help you set goals, and to check in just to see what types of struggles or obstacles that you are encountering along the way, and see if perhaps we can provide some additional options, maybe some suggestions or resources if needed. We also have an online digital portal that regardless of where your location is, you can log into it. It's individualized to the information that you want to learn about. And it offers calculators, webinars, articles, things of that nature. And then we also work with additional resources to assist with other types of topics, such as credit, debt management, things along those lines. So here is a quick list of the types of WWP programs and services that we offer. So we do have our financial wellness programs, which it would include the financial education program. We also have a benefits program that is comprised of national service officers who can answer questions regarding your VA benefits, who also may be able to file claims for you or any types of appeals. So that particular program is available if you are enrolled and you're an alumni with us. We also have a Warriors to Work program, and the Warriors to Work program assists with resume writing, interview prep. We also have a job board. All of these programs are free. They are at no cost to you. And then we also have mental health programs. So a couple of those programs is our Combat Stress Recovery program, who offers some mental health, it's kind of multiple day events where you can also engage with other veterans. We have a talk program and an independence program as well. And another kind of category is some of our engagement programs. So one of our very popular engagement programs is our alumni program. And the alumni program offers outreach, and it also provides events for warriors and family support members to engage with other veterans as well. So for those of you who aren't certain or feeling a little bit hesitant to kind of go back and start meeting people again, and you feel like maybe you would like to kind of develop a kind of a support network with veterans, this is a really good program for you. And then we also have a physical health and wellness type of program. And so that would include the Soldier Ride program, which is one of our most popular programs. So you do get to join a ride, and some of the rides are long, some of them are short, and you ride with our team, and they really help you along the way. That's for people who are wanting to get back out, maybe get physical again, maybe they've never tried riding before and would like to try it again. And these are bicycles, they're not motorcycles, just to kind of clarify that. We also have a PH&W program that will help you with, diet and exercise. They also offer, supportive services when it comes to physical health and wellness. And then we also have an adaptive sports program so that you can stay healthy and engage with other veterans. So here is a list of additional resources that here in the financial education program we actually hand out to those that are enrolled in our program. Some of these, most of them are government websites. Some of them will give you some information. It kind of does tell you what the reason is. So if you're looking to say to apply for VA benefits or managed benefits, there is that e-benefits website there for you. So if you're interested in knowing a little bit more about resources and our eligibility criteria, you can contact our resource center or go to our Wounded Warrior Project website. The resource center number is right there on the slide, along with our website. When you go onto the website, you can click and it'll give you a more detailed information about the different programs that we offer. If you are wanting more information about eligibility, you can call the resource center. We have an excellent team who's there to answer your questions and give you more information and even help you or assist getting you registered if that's what you think you would be interested in doing. I really want to thank everybody for allowing me to be here and to present to you. It is an honor and definitely a privilege. Kelly?
Thank you so much, Deborah, and thank you, Todd, both for your time today and taking us through today's presentation. We are now going to get into Q&A, so if anybody has any questions you'd like to ask Deborah or Todd today, either on Wounded Warrior Project or the budgeting that Todd went over, please go ahead and submit that using your question feature, and we'll make sure to get that asked. But we do have a couple questions, so we'll go ahead and get started. The first question is for Deborah. Where is Wounded Warrior Project located, and is there a location in Cincinnati?
So we do not have a location in Cincinnati, an actual brick and mortar location there. We do have about 26 locations across the country. Our headquarters is in Jacksonville, Florida, and I myself am out of the San Antonio, Texas area. Now that does not necessarily mean that there aren't events in your area. We have also we have a lot of hybrid events, and we also have a lot of virtual events. So you can, if you'd like to attend some of those events, you can reach out to our resource center and they can talk to you a little bit about enrolling and some of that eligibility criteria and see if they can get you, on your way.
Thank you. This next question is for Todd. It's asking about emergency savings funds. It says that they've heard a lot about an emergency savings fund and was wondering how much money they should set aside for that.
Well, great question. Oftentimes we will hear, 3 to 6 months. That's very challenging for most of us in terms of how much we can set aside over a longer period of time. What I would do, at minimum, try to aim at least 3 months of expenses. And you probably are going to have to start, in smaller steps. We actually, in one of the previous presentations, and you could go online through the credit union and find some additional details. But what I would do is, again, make certain, number one, that you're setting up a budget and putting in some type of percentage. I mean, just find a dollar amount that you're consistently setting aside every, paycheck as you start, in your new employment, or just in the dollars that you have now, making certain that every month you're putting away, or every paycheck that you're consistent through time. Through your budget, it should tell you as a guide how much you will need in case of a hardship. In terms of dollar amount, that's going to vary with different families and different income sizes. But just set up a budget. Number one, look at your overall expenses. If something were to occur, how much would you need to cover those expenses? So short-term expenses, looking at three months, make that a goal. And if you can arrive at a 3-month goal, set that goal out further. You should always be pushing yourself in personal finance to get better and to do this work in a different way. So at minimum, I would just encourage you to, one, set up a budget and be consistent with the dollar amounts that you're putting aside every paycheck. So at minimum, you have 3 months expenses should something happen that's some type of financial setback.
The next question is also for you, Todd. It asks, how can I budget with little income?
Yeah, this is always a challenge when we're looking at our overall income. How do we make it work? Certain expenses are not going away. While we may not be able to set aside a certain dollar amount that is an emergency savings fund or something like that, that's a longer term financial goal, retirement, those sorts of things, take things as they are. So when you're getting money, again, we have to have a budget. Deborah mentioned this, I completely agree. That has to be the highest priority. So whatever dollars that you do have, setting a budget means that you have a plan for how you're going to spend whatever money that you have. So regardless of that dollar amount, even with minimal funds, you want to make certain, the 2 budgets that I showed you today, at least work with that 50-30-20 budget, so that that even with limited dollars, we do meet our obligations for the month. So make certain that your highest priorities, that's taking care of yourself and your family and meeting those obligations for food and utilities, those sorts of things. Use your budget just to do those things alone for the time being. Not having a budget, assuming you have a budget or numbers in your head, is not the same thing as actually doing this work. So make certain that you reach out to either Deb or myself and let us help you along that way, or use one of the budgets that we've presented today to make certain that regardless of the money, you have every dollar accounted for, that you know how you're going to spend that money come the following month.
And then we'll go ahead and end on this last question. It's for Deborah. It's asking, where can I learn more about Wounded Warrior Project, and can non-veterans get involved with volunteering or other things like that?
Okay, so as far as where you can get more information, you can go onto our website. You can also contact our resource center. If there's something in particular that you're interested in knowing more about, or a particular, say, topic like mental health programs or physical health and wellness programs, you can let them know. You can let one of my teammates at the resource center know, look, I'm interested in knowing more about this. And they can give you more information, maybe ask some additional questions that'll help them get you, the best information for what you're looking for, or maybe help you narrow it down. As far as volunteer is concerned, or non-veterans volunteering, we don't really have a lot of volunteer type of situations, or not situations, but opportunities. There are a couple of things that you can look into. We do have some events throughout the country. They're called carry forward events. You can do those whether they're virtually, or you can do them at a location if you're close to a location. And it is a 5K that we run. If it is at a location, you may be able to see about trying to work that location, or just even putting together a team. And getting involved that way, and showing your support in that way. You can also call the resource center again and talk to them about seeing if there are any volunteer opportunities, maybe with specific teams, because it is a large organization and we are in various locations in the country. I'm not fully aware of every single opportunity that might be available to you.
Thank you so much. That's going to conclude our Q&A session for today. But with that, I wanted to thank both Todd and Deborah for taking us through today's presentation. And I wanted to thank you all for joining us and thank you for your service. We hope you have a great rest of your day and have a happy Veterans Day.